Yo, wagwan my people, and welcome back. And today I'm going to be creating soundscapes. Now, soundscapes are a scenery created by sounds, meaning it's a combination of sounds that arises from an environment. And the VST I'll be using is Omnisphere. So let's not waste any more time and get straight into it. Now, when I'm approaching sound design, there are some principles that I like to follow which help me with my sound design creative process. And these are modulation, shaping and toning, layering, and applying effects. Now, with all that being said, I'm going to choose a waveform within the oscillator of Omnisphere. Now, as you can see here, there are 4 oscillators, A, B, C, and D. And I'm going to start with A. And then when you come down to this section right here, which is the oscillator window, you can see that there are 2 options, sample and synth. I'm going to start with synth, and I'll get into the sample section later on within this tutorial. And I'm going to choose my waveform by left clicking in this area right here. And when you do that, this window pops up right here. Now these 5 presets right here are all quite basic waveforms, but I'm going to go into these 3 options right here, where you've got classic waveforms, analog timbres, and digital wavetables. I'm going to start with digital wavetables, and then I'm going to come down to overtones, and then there's all these different presets to choose from. I'm going to start with CS Ringer 1, and this is what it sounds like. Now the first thing I'm going to do is start with the shape control here. Now what this shape control does, as it sweeps through the waveform, it creates subtle or dramatic changes. So have a listen while I'm playing the note as I'm sweeping through the waveform by moving this shape control slider. As you can hear there, as I'm sweeping through the waveform, you can hear those changes. Now, what I'm doing here is called modulation. Now, modulation means to create movement and change within the waveform as it moves through it. Now, to create this modulation, all I have to do is right click on the slider right here, and then you go down to this option, modulate, and then I'm going to modulate with LFO. And as you can see, this option pops up right here. And as I play, now listen. You can hear it moving through the waveform. What I also can do is I can speed up that modulation by coming down to the rate knob right here. And now I'm going to increase it, and now listen to how fast it moves through the waveform. So the more you increase the rate, the faster it will modulate through the waveform. And then when you decrease it, the slower it will move through the waveform. So to start with, I'm going to have a play with the shape control and see what sort of tones I can come up with. Now I'm happy with how the way that sounds. Now the next thing I'm going to move on to is this symmetry control right here. What this does is when you modulate it, it adds tone and colour. So I'm going to move the slider as the note's being played and have a listen. So you can hear what's happening there as it's moving through the waveform, how much colour it's adding and how much tone it's adding. So I'm going to apply the same process again by right clicking on the symmetry control. I'm going to go to modulate and modulate with LFO, and then once again this option pops up right here. Now let's have a play around with the parameters and let's see what sort of tones and harmonics we can come up with. I like that, but I want to change the depth of the LFO, meaning I don't want it to go so deep into the waveform. Now to do that, I can come up to the source here and turn it down. As I turn it down, watch this blue area right here. It will shrink as I turn down the source. Now, as you can hear there, it's not going so deep into the waveform now. So I'm happy with how the way things are so far. So the next thing I'm going to move on to is this hard sync control right here. Now what this hard sync control does is it uses two oscillators. One is the slave, one is the master. Any changes made to the slave pitch, it doesn't affect the master pitch. But what it does change, it changes the harmonic structures and the overtones. So I'm going to have a play around with it and see what we can come up with. And you can hear right there how it's adding those harmonic overtones. So I'm going to modulate it, right click on the control, go to modulate, modulate with LFO. Now while I'm here in this option, you can see that we've got many more options to modulate with. As you can see, there's LFO, velocity, wheel, so on and so forth. But most of the time I like to use LFO, and there are other times I do use envelope. But the reason why I like to use LFO, because I'm always getting that constant movement. I'm always looking for that movement, that modulation to keep my sound interesting and unique. So let's modulate with LFO. Now let's have a play around with the parameters and see what sort of tones and harmonics we can come up with. Now I'm liking that so far. I'm really happy with that. Next thing I'm going to move on to is the envelope. So I'm going to come over this section right here, and I'm going to increase the attack just so as it comes in, it doesn't come in so suddenly, it just comes in smoother. And then I'm also going to increase the release, so we've got a longer release, so as I let go of the note, the sound will still carry on for a bit longer. Yeah, it's a much more smoother transition on the way in and on the way out. Now you can hear there, we've got a lot of modulation going on between the different overtones, the harmonics and the pitch, creating really interesting movements, keeping the sound really unique. Now going back to the principles which I spoke about earlier, which are modulation, shaping and toning, layering and applying effects, you can hear and see what the process has been for me to get to where I am now to create this sound. I've applied modulation and I've applied shaping and toning. Now I do want to add a bit more modulation, so I'm going to show you few more options that we have. So I'm going to click on the oscillator magnifying glass with the plus sign in it, and then it goes on to this oscillator zoom page. Now this oscillator zoom page, it gives us more options to create more modulation. Now here we can see we got this option called FM, and then we've got ring, we've got WS, we've got union, harmonia and granular, and all these can be applied to create more unique tones. You can even add distortion and even create more modulation. So the first one I'm going to start with is FM, which is frequency modulation. Now what this does is it applies modulation to the pitch. You can apply that by just clicking this icon right here. Now it's active. Now I'm going to play around with the frequency and the depth to start off with, and let's see what sort of sound we can create. Instantly it sounds different to what we already have, so if I turn it off, have a listen to the original sound. Turn it back on. So let's have a play around with the frequency and the depth and see what we can come up with. But before we get to that, whenever I delve into frequency modulation, I like to have a tuner VST present. Now this is Logic's own tuner VST. Now the reason why I like to have this is because when you are modulating the pitch, it's moving through the different keys and the different notes. And because I'm currently working on note C2, I like to make sure that whatever I'm creating corresponds with the note that I'm pressing. So I like to have this present at all times. We are currently on C, which is fine, which is where we want to be. Let's start with moving the frequency and the depth and see what we can come up with. As you can see there on the tuner, it's saying F, and I'm currently pressing C. This is why I like to have this present, so everything corresponds with what I want it to do. Happy with that so far. I'm going to try some of these controls over here, FM shape. As you can hear now, we're getting more interesting modulation as it's moving through the waveform, and it's creating these really unique tones as it's modulating through the pitch and it's modulating through the waveform and creating this consistent and like dramatic changes. And even though the way it moves through the harmonics, creating these really like unique tones. Now let's try the FM symmetry. Let's try FM sync. So I'm really happy with that so far. Now I want to add some granular. So I'm going to come over to the granular section here. But before I move on to that, between the granular, the harmonia and the unison, you can only have one of these options selected at a time within Omnisphere. I'm not sure why that is. It's just that within Omnisphere, it only allows you to use one of these at a time. Whereas with the FM, the ring and the WS, you can use all these three at the same time with either one of unison or harmonia or granular, but you can't use granular, harmonia or unison at the same time. It has to be one or the other. So I'm going to start with granular. Let's turn it on. Now, before I get into anything else, I need to explain what a granular is. Now, a granular is a type of synthesis that fragments pieces of audio into small bits of grains. So it's taking bits of audio and really breaking it down and creating really unique overtones, harmonics, even subtle distortions. So let's have a listen to it so far. And you can already hear it right there, the changes that it's done, and I haven't even changed anything. So the first thing I'm going to try is the intensity, so I'm going to turn that up, which is this knob right here. Now you can really hear how it's intensified, how it's broke down these small bits of audio. That's a bit too much for me at the moment, so I'm going to turn it down as I want it just to be slightly a bit more subtle. Yeah, about there. I'm going to turn up the smoothing. That's a bit more smoother transition between the fragments and the bits of audio. Let's turn up the pitch grains and see what we can come up with. And I'm also going to turn up the detuning. Yeah. Now, straight away you can hear the tension, the deepness, that darkness, and how the way everything's just modulating and complementing each other. And this is why I really love doing these sorts of sound designs for soundscapes. I love it, man. Listen to that. And I'm really happy with how the way that's turned out so far. But before I move on, I want to go back to some of the previous controls, as I want to turn down some of the LFOs just to slow down that modulation. So I'm going to exit the oscillator zoom page, and then on here on the shape and the symmetry and the hard sync, I'm going to select them and then turn down the LFO. So I'm going to start with the shape control, and then I'm going to right click on it, come down to show modulation and click LFO 1, and then I'm going to come down to the rate here and then turn it down. I'm going to come down to symmetry, right click on it, go to show modulation, go to LFO 2, and then I'm going to turn the rate for the LFO down on this as well. Yeah. And I'm also going to do it for the hard sync control as well. Let's turn the rate down. Yeah, and that's much better. Now, as you can hear, we've used all the principles so far, which has been modulation, shaping and toning. And the next one I'm going to move on to is layering. So to do that, I'm going to select oscillator B. So let's select it. Let's also turn it on. Now, this is where I'm going to move on to adding a sample. So we're going to click the sample option here. Click on this empty space right here, and then this window pops up. We've got so many different options to pick from. All these here are the different presets which we can choose from within Omnisphere. I'm feeling textures. I want to add some sort of dark texture to this soundscape. So I'm coming over to categories. I'm going to select textures, and then I'm going to go to mood. I'm going to select dark, and then I'm just going to start from here, have a look through these samples and see which one I like. But before I do that, I'm going to turn off oscillator A. So to do that, I'm going to click on this X right here to exit this window, and then click on this little icon right here, which turns off and disables oscillator A. Now I'm going to select oscillator B, clicking this area right here, which brings back up this option. Now let's have a flick through some of these samples and see which ones we like. I like to work like this because I like to hear things individually, and then afterwards I bring everything together. I like this one, B-52 Bombers. Let's give this one a try. So let's close down this window right here by clicking on this X at the top left hand corner of Omnisphere. Now let's have a listen to that. I'm going to go up an octave, as I feel it's just slightly a bit too low. So I'm going to come over to the pitch section right here and click on this box right here where it says 0. Then I'm going to go up to plus 12, so it pitches it up a full octave. Now let's have a listen. Yeah, that's better. Now let's have a play around with some of the parameters. I'm going to start with FM, which is frequency modulation, which we used in the previous oscillator A. Let's turn it on. Now let's have a listen. Let's turn the depth down. I like that. Yeah. Yeah. Now I want to try a different option, which is this one right here, which says WS, which is called Wave Shaper. Now what this does is it's a unique way of adding distortion. Let's have a listen to it. Let's turn up the depth of the shaper, which is this control right here. You can really hear how it's applying distortion to those harmonics. Yeah. Now I want to add some unison. Now let's have a listen. Let's turn it up. Okay, now I'm really happy with the way that sounds so far. So I'm going to come out of the oscillator zoom page. Let's turn oscillator A back on by clicking this option right here. Or you could also come down here and turn it on. Now let's have a listen to both of them together. Yeah, I really like that. So I'm going to come back into oscillator B, and I'm also going to play around with the envelope. So I'm going to have a slower attack, so it's got a smoother transition as it starts, and I'm also going to turn up the release, and as I come off the note it still carries on playing for a little bit longer. Now you can really hear how these two sounds have come together to create one body of sound, and you can really hear the depth of that soundscape, how the way it's so modulating through the different frequencies and the different pitches, creating these really unique overtones, and how the way the harmonics are like modulating through each other. I really love how the way it's come together so far. I'm really happy with the way that sounds so far, but I do want to add one more layer to it. So I'm going to come into the C oscillator. Let's turn it on, and this time I'll add a synth. So I'm going to flick through some of the options and see which ones we like. Choose one of these wavetables right here. So I'm going to come back down to digital wavetables, but this time I'm going to go through sweepers and just start from the top. So this first one here is called Battles. Let's have a listen. Not this one. Let's flick through some of the presets and see which ones we like. Oh, I like this one. Got a nice tone to it, that has. So I'm going to change the pitch. At the moment it's on -12. So I'm going to pull it back to 0. I'm really happy with the way this sounds so far, but now I want to add more modulation, so I'm going to apply the same process again. So let's start with adding the shape control. So let's modulate that. Right click, modulate, modulate with LFO. Now let's have a listen. Let's turn up the rate, as I think the rate of the LFO is just a little bit too slow. Okay, I like that. I'm going to turn the source down. Turn the rate back up. And then I'm also going to turn up the attack on the envelope just so we get a smoother transition as the sound comes in. That's better. Now let's have a play with the symmetry. Let's modulate that. I like the sound of that so far as well. Let's turn the rate up. I like that. Now let's try the hard sync control. I'm not really feeling the hard sync, just sounds slightly a bit too harsh and it's not really what I'm looking for, so I'm gonna stick with the shape control and the symmetry modulation so far, as I really like where we are. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna apply some filter just to filter out some of those higher frequencies. So applying this filter has taken away too much of the higher frequencies, so I'm going to turn up the cutoff just so I can bring back some of those higher frequencies. I like that. So now I'm going to apply more modulation, so let's go back into the oscillator zoom page. But this time let's add some harmonia. Now what a harmonia does, it's like a harmonizer. So as you can see here, there's different layers. If I click on this option here, you can see you can move through the different pitches. So at the moment, the standard, the default is +7. So it's like you can create different harmonies. So I'm going to go up to +12, so it just goes up a full octave, and I'm going to keep the second layer on 0. So let's have a listen to that. I like that. I'm going to increase the detune on the second layer. Yeah, I like that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply some ring modulation. Now what this does is it modulates the amplitude of the sound, so meaning that fullness, that depth of the sound, it will modulate it. So let's have a listen to it. Now I've turned it on. Getting really unique tones. I really like it, so let's turn the depth down, as I just think it's just slightly a bit too much. I really like what we've got so far, so now I'm happy with that. I'm going to turn on oscillator A and B and have a listen to all 3 layers and see how everything sounds together so far. So let's come out of the oscillator zoom page, turn on oscillator B, now A. Now let's have a listen to everything so far. Yeah, that sounds cold. I'm really feeling that. The only thing I'm going to do now is, as you can see, I've just gone back onto oscillator C. I'm going to turn the release up just so we've got a longer tail as I come off the note, so the note just keeps playing on just for a bit longer. Jeez. Okay, now to finish off, I'm just going to add some effects, and to do that, within Omnisphere, you can come over here and click the FX tab, and then this window pops up right here, and the default setting is on common, meaning what this common option does is if I apply any effects here, it will affect all the oscillators together at once. But if I want to apply effects individually to each oscillator, I can just select the corresponding one. So if I wanted to apply an effect to oscillator A, I will select A. If I wanted to apply it to B, I'll select B, and so on and so forth. What I want to do is I want to apply an effect to oscillator C. So let's select C. Let's click on this option right here, the down arrow, and then this window pops up. Now we've got all these options to choose from to apply effects. I'm going to go down to creative and select this option right here, inner space. I'm going to turn off oscillator A and B. Now let's have a listen to what this does. That sounds amazing. You can hear it's like a unique way of applying reverb. And then I'm going to select oscillator A. I'm also going to turn it on. Let's turn off oscillator C. Go back to the effects page. Select oscillator A for the effects. Click on the down arrow for oscillator A effects page. And I want to apply some more modulation, and this time I want to add some chorus, so I'm going to select analog chorus. Now let's have a listen to that. That sounds amazing. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select common and apply some reverb to all the oscillators together. So I'll come down here to reverb. Let's select proverb. Now this is applying reverb to all the oscillators that I've been using, which is A, B, and C. So I'm going to turn it up a bit. I'm going to turn it up to 24%. Turn on all the oscillators. So let's turn on B and C. Go back to the effects page. Now let's have a listen. I'm really happy with the way this has turned out. Just applying that reverb to all the oscillators has just really put everything into the same space. Just to finish off, I'm going to select oscillator A, and I'm going to come down here where you got this chain link. So let's turn it on for B, and turn it on for C. Now what this does is it links all the oscillators together, and whatever changes I make, let's say within the filter or envelope, it will change them all together instead of me changing them individually by going into each oscillator. So I want to turn up the release some more, so I've got a longer release. And as you can see, as I'm turning it up, you can see the option right above it where it says link A, B, and C. So meaning it's linked all the envelopes for oscillator A and B together. So it's turning them up all at the same time, so everything is in sync. I'm going to turn up the attack as well. So let's have a listen to that now. So I'm really happy with the way this has turned out. I've created a soundscape that's dark, it's ominous, it's eerie, it's mystical, it's moving, it's got that distant sound to it, and you can really paint a picture with the sound that I've created, and that's how it works for me, especially with soundscapes. I'm really into sci-fi films, and it's all based on the principles that I spoke about earlier, which is modulation, shaping and toning, layering and applying effects. And with those principles in mind, you can always create unique sounds, and don't be afraid to experiment and test things out. this is how I've been able to learn and get to where I am now. So with all that being said, I really hope that you've enjoyed the tutorial, but more importantly, I hope that you've learned something and you can apply these techniques to your own sound design and creative process. And until next time, peace out.